Welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. Glad you could join in. We are here under the Bodhi tree as Gautama Buddha reveals spiritual wisdom through the Dhammapada, so that we can meditate on these and apply in our human sojourn towards nirvana. As I mentioned in part 1 of this video, which you can find in my book playlist, we learned that Siddhartha Gautama, better known as the Buddha, lived between 563 B.C.E. to 483 B.C.E., and that's before the birth of Jesus and the creation of Christianity. Obviously, 2 different regions, miles apart, and I find it interesting how in the vacuum of what we can call morality, or fill in the blank, religions are born. Many people confuse spirituality with religion, and to me, they are worlds apart, in my opinion. The way I see it, spirituality is a truth that is something intangible, sublime, that can only be demonstrated by the way we choose to live. And to me, it seems that we inherently know this when we see it in ourselves and in others. On the other hand, religion is a set of structures, for lack of a better word, that man constructs as he or she feels in order to align with that which is the ideal truth for the human race that allows to live in alignment with all living things for the betterment of the soul and the human race. Well, that's a definition that I'm working on, and it's still in progress. Siddhartha Gautama was born into the Shakya clan, a warrior family, and his father, King Suddhodana, wanted Siddhartha to inherit the kingdom and become a king, and the thing is, he sheltered Gautama from the outside world until one day at the age of 29. Interesting parallel, if I may draw from the Bible in the book of Luke, chapter 3, verse 23, where it states that Jesus himself was about 30 years old when he began his ministry. Anyways, Gautama renounced his opportunity to be king and went off to seek enlightenment and to find a solution to the plight of human suffering. And in that quest, founded Buddhism in India and became a great spiritual leader, and Buddhism is now practiced in many parts of the world. I invite you to get into your most comfy sitting position, or relax in any which way you want. I see some of you are pretty flexible sitting in Padmasana. I'm still working on the lotus myself. For now, crisscross applesauce is fine for me. So now, let's turn the page. The Dhammapada, Sayings of Buddha, translated from the original Pali by Thomas Cleary. Section 9. Evil. This chapter emphasizes the inevitability of ill consequences following evil actions. This inevitability, it must be emphasized, does not mean inevitable immediacy. Depending on the totality of contributing conditions, there may be a time lag of any duration between an action and the ripening of its consequences. This is precisely the reason for reminders and warnings like those found in the aphorisms of this chapter. If the ill consequences of evil acts were inevitably immediate, there would be no further need for admonition. Similarly, the development of bad behavioral habits may be too insidious for the individual to consider ill consequences in time to avoid them, if not for deliberate reflection. 1. Hasten to do good. Restrain your mind from evil. The mind of one who is sluggish about doing good finds amusement in evil. 2. Whoever has done something wrong should not repeat it. Do not set your mind on it, for misery is an accumulation of evil. 3. Let those who have done good repeat it again and again. Set your mind on it, for happiness is the accumulation of good. Note, even in the lesser journey, whose goal is peace, it is necessary to engage in constructive and positive action in order to bring about individual development of the capacity for liberated knowledge and vision. 4. Even one who is evil sees good as long as the evil has not developed. But when the evil has developed, the evildoer sees evils. 5. Even one who is good may see ill as long as the good has not developed. But when the good has developed, the good one sees good. Note: the time lapse that may occur between specific causes and their effects creates latitude for all sorts of imaginative self-deception. 6. Do not underestimate evil, thinking it will not affect you. Dripping water can even fill a pitcher, drop by drop. A fool is filled with evil, even if one accumulates it little by little. Note: the Tao Te Ching says, no calamity is greater than underestimating opponents. End note. 7. Do not underestimate good, thinking it will not affect you. Dripping water can even fill a pitcher, drop by drop. One who is wise is filled with good, even if one accumulates it little by little. Note: the Tao Te Ching says, do the great while it is still small. End note. 8. Just as a merchant with many goods but few companions avoids a dangerous road, and just as someone who wants to live avoids poison, one should avoid all evils. Note: the classical Zen master Gautama presented the image of walking through a village where the wells are all poisoned. The Japanese Zen master Dogen wrote, when studying in this way, evils are manifest as a continuum of being ever not done. Inspired by this manifestation, seeing through to the fact that evils are not done, one settles it finally. At precisely such a time as the beginning, middle, and end manifest as evils not done. Evils are not born from conditions, they are only not done. Evils do not perish through conditions, they are only not done. End note. 9. One without a wound on the hand may remove poison by hand. The poison will not get in where there is no wound. There is no evil for one who does none. 10. If anyone offends an innocent person, the ill of that will come back to that fool, like dust thrown into the wind. 11. Some are born in the womb, evildoers go to hell. People whose conduct is good go to heaven. People who are free from compulsion attain nirvana. Note: nirvana is even finer than the happiness of heaven. End note. 12. There is nowhere in the world, not in the sky, nor in the sea, nor in the depths of the earth, where one can escape evil deeds. 13. There is nowhere in the world, not in the sky, nor in the sea, nor in the depths of the earth, where death will not overcome you. Note: there's nowhere one can escape the consequences of one's own actions, or the operation of natural laws of causality. These lines not only express evident truths, they also indirectly repudiate all beliefs that have only distraction value. End note. End section. Section 10. Violence. This chapter focuses on development of compassion for others by thinking of them in the same way one thinks of oneself. Based on this realization, the aphorisms in this chapter encourage nonviolence and protection of others by self-control. For those who confuse self-control with self-mortification, this chapter also includes a warning about the futility of mechanical asceticism and the need for real inner transformation of character rather than the more outward change of habit or appearance. 1. Everyone trembles at the whip. Everyone is afraid of death. Considering others as yourself, do not kill or promote killing. 2. Everyone trembles at the whip. Everyone likes life. Considering others as yourself, do not kill or promote killing. 3. Whoever hurts living beings who all want happiness may be seeking personal happiness, but will not attain felicity after death. 4. Whoever does not hurt living beings, who all seek happiness, those seeking personal happiness, will attain felicity after death. Note: compassion is ordinarily considered to be the distinguishing hallmark of the Buddhism of the Great Journey. But as illustrated here in the first 4 aphorisms of this chapter, it is also part of the lesser journey because it is a natural consequence of perceiving material laws. End note. 5. Do not say anything harsh. What you have said will be said back to you. Angry talk is painful. Retaliation will get you. 6. If you can make yourself as still as a broken gong, you have attained nirvana. There is no agitation in you. Note: Zen Master Dogen recommends meditation on the proverb, if you can keep your mouth as silent as your nose, you will avoid a lot of trouble. End note. 7. As a cowherd drives cattle to pasture with a rod, so do old age and death drive the life of the living. 8. But the fool doing evil deeds does not understand. The idiot burns by his own axe as though he was on fire. 9 through 12. Whoever injures the innocent and offends the upright quickly goes to one of 10 certain states: discomfort, loss, physical injury, serious illness, insanity, oppression by a ruler, cruel slander, loss of relations, destruction of possessions, or fire burns his houses. When his body dissolves, the fool is born in hell. 13. Neither nudism, nor matted hair, nor wearing mud, nor fasting, nor lying on hard ground, nor dust and dirt, nor squatting motionless will purify a mortal who has not gotten over doubt and desire. Note: Hadrat Ali said, sleep in certainty is better than prayer in doubt. 14. If one practices equanimity, even if adorned, if one is peaceful, restrained, disciplined, and chaste, that is the one who is priestly, the one who is religious, the one who is a mendicant. Note: even if adorned means even though living an outwardly ordinary life in the world, ideals of priestliness and abstinence were redefined and refocused by Gautama Buddha to refer to inner qualities rather than outward performances. End note. 15. Is there anyone in the world restrained by modesty who does not arouse censure as a good horse needs no whipping? 16. Like a good horse on whom a whip alights, be earnest and energetic. By faith, discipline, vigor, concentration, and discernment of truth, expert in knowledge and action, aware, slough off this mass of misery. 17. Engineers conduct water, fletchers make arrows true, carpenters straighten wood, the well-disciplined train themselves. End of section. Section 11. Old age. This chapter offers some sobering contemplations of the passage of time, the transitoriness of things, the brevity of youth, and the approach of old age. Such reflections, which are to be found in many traditions, do not represent a philosophy of pessimism, as some outside observers are inclined to believe, but are exercises dedicated to everyday sobriety and will. Contemplation of old age is to be used, above all, to stimulate the individual to take steps to avoid ending up by meeting death without work, passing away without having really lived. 1. What mirth is there, what joy, while constantly burning? Shrouded in darkness, why not seek a light? 2. See this image, created by mind, a mass of wounds, diseased, pensive, impermanent, and unstable. 3. This material form is decayed, a nest of disease, frail. This putrid body is destroyed, for life ends in death. 4. What attachment is there when one has seen these white bones as like gourds discarded in autumn? 5. The bones are made a citadel plastered with flesh and blood, in which lie old age and death, pride and contempt. 6. The splendid chariots of kings wear out, so does the body of age. Thus do good people teach each other. Note: aphorisms 2 through 6 refer to a basic meditation practice. This image refers to the body, which is described as a mass of wounds. In this perspective, in view of its normal oozing of secretions and waste products, contemplation of the body as impure, in need of constant cleaning and maintenance, is one of the elementary exercises of the lesser journey, not a doctrine of morbidity. In the greater journey, contemplation of the body as impure dissolves into contemplation of the body as space-like. End of note. 7. A person who has learned little ages like an ox, his flesh increases, but not his insight. 8. I have gone through many repeated beginnings, seeking without finding the maker of this house. It is miserable to start over again and again. 9. You have been seen, maker of the house. You will not rebuild again. Your framing is all broken, your ridgepole destroyed. The mind set on detachment from created things has attained extinction of craving. Note: the maker of this house here refers to the individual mentality, the myth and illusion maker that sees the body as the self or treats it like a possession or attribute rather than alone. You will not rebuild again means that when you have seen the source of illusion, you do not deceive yourself anymore with images of false self-importance. End note. 10. Those who have not practiced chastity, those who have not acquired wealth in youth, ruminate like old herons on a little lake without fish. 11. Those who have not practiced chastity, those who have not acquired wealth in youth, lie like worn-out boughs, moaning over the past. Note: acquiring wealth in youth refers to richness of character. It also refers literally to material wealth, whereby one may avoid being a burden on others, thus making for a less anxious life and less remorseful passing. End of note. End of section. Section 12. The Self. This chapter outlines the consciousness of the responsible individual, one who is fully aware of the consequences of action and thus is intelligently self-controlled. The need to master oneself before helping others, usually not expected or emphasized in altruistic teachings as ordinarily known or conceived, is introduced here. Unless the compassionate individual is already independent of personal needs by virtue of self-work, compassion degenerates into ineffective sentimentality. This may be seen on every level of human endeavor, from local interactions to international relations. 1. One who knows self is dear will keep it well guarded. The wise one keeps a vigil a third of the night. Note: it has often been imagined that Buddhism denies self and preaches self-abnegation as the highest ideal. A writer claiming to be an adept at inner and outer yoga even claims that Buddhism is inherently authoritarian and therefore intrinsically abusive because it regards selflessness as the summum bonum. While there may be unscrupulous people who use this idea to control, suppress, or bully others, that is not Buddhism, but an aberrant abuse of misconstrued idea. The 17th century Zen master Suzuki Shosan wrote, "Stand up and be responsible for yourself. Beware of your mind and take responsibility for yourself." In the same vein, he also wrote, "Be aware of yourself and know yourself. If you don't know yourself, you cannot know anything else." End note. 2. One should establish oneself in rectitude first, then one may instruct others. The wise will remain unstained. 3. If one would make oneself as one teaches others to be, one should master self-control, for the self is truly hard to tame. Note: classical Zen Buddhists are particularly adamant about the need to be enlightened oneself before trying to teach others. People today seem to think teacherhood is a position. End note. 4. Self is master of self. Who else would be the master? With a self-well control, one gains a master hard to find. Note: the incompatibility of authoritarianism with authentic Buddhism is starkly revealed here. The idea that Buddhism is authoritarian, held even by some followers, especially in the West, is based on false models of Buddhism. End note. 5. The evil done by oneself, born of oneself, produced by oneself, crushes the unintelligent like a diamond does a gemstone. 6. One who has perpetual bad conduct spreads over him as a practical vine does a tree, makes himself as his enemy wishes him to be. Note: makes himself as his enemy wishes him to be. People weak in conscience or strong in aggressiveness may find it easier to master themselves by thinking in terms of thwarting the wishes of ill-wishers. Though roundabout, this way of thinking is accurate and effective. End of note. 7. It is easy to do what is bad and harmful to oneself. What is beneficial and good is supremely hard to do. Note: the essential contrast here is between the ease of indulgence and the difficulty of self-mastery. End note. 8. Whoever rejects the teaching of the worthy and noble who live the truth, an imbecile fixated on wrong opinion, produces self-destructive results, like the cane that dies on fruiting. Note: hence the danger of accepting second-hand opinions about what a teaching says and means. End note. 9. It is by oneself that evil is done, by oneself that one is afflicted. It is by oneself that evil is not done, by oneself that one is purified. Purity and impurity are individual matters. No one purifies another. Note: people in a hurry to find a teacher to solve their problems for them could do well to digest these lines. To go to a teacher unprepared is to importune a real teacher and to empower a false teacher. What good does it do in either case? End note. 10. Do not neglect your own need for another's, no matter how great. Having discerned your own need, do what is really useful. Note: the point of this passage is not that you should not help others, but that you cannot help others in a real sense, even if you try, unless and until you have first developed your own understanding and capacity to a sufficient degree. Lending a hand just to feel like you are doing some good is really selfish indulgence, not altruistic action. The superficial who are inclined to confuse activism with action are often revealed by their reaction to statements such as this one here in the Dhammapada. End note. End section. Section 13. The World. This chapter depicts happiness in this world and beyond the world. These two kinds of happiness are not seen as contraries, but as a single continuity of spiritual evolution resulting from self-mastery. 1. Do not practice base ways. Do not dwell in heedlessness. Do not act on false views. Do not increase worldliness. 2. Arise. Do not be negligent. Practice the principle of good conduct. One who acts on truth is happy in this world and beyond. 3. Practice the principle of good conduct, not evil conduct. One who acts on truth is happy in this world and beyond. Note: from the perspective illustrated by these first 3 aphorisms, worldliness and happiness in the world are not the same thing. Even in the lesser journey, a follower of Buddhism strives positively and constructively for true happiness in the world without worldliness. The observation is that worldliness, which here means being steeped in worldly views, does not produce happiness, but the opposite, because lack of fluidity in handling a transient world ultimately leads to disappointment and sorrow. Disappointment and sorrow are the opposite of Buddhism. They are the objects of observation that Buddhism cuts through by means of perfect insight. End note. 4. Whoever looks upon this world as a bubble, as a mirage, is not seen by the King of Death. Note: this method of contemplation has been confused with an article of dogma by literal-minded scholars. The great Japanese Zen master Muso Soseki explains that the contemplative method described here is not ultimate, but a method of breaking through fixation on views of the world. This needs to be said because fixation on the view of the world as a mirage is also an illusion with undesirable consequences. In the Avatammasaka Sutra, there are extensive descriptions of uses of such exercises for attainment and realization of transcendental tolerance in the chapter called The 10 Acceptances. End of note. 5. Come, look at this world, like a painted royal chariot. Fools sink in it, the knowing have no attachment to it. Note: like a painted royal chariot means that it may have a splendid appearance, but will eventually break down and fall apart. This colorful image is simply a way of practicing recollection of transitoriness. End of note. 6. One who was formerly negligent, then later becomes vigilant, lights up the world like an unclouded moon. 7. One who uses goodness to cover the evil he has done lights up the world like an unclouded moon. 8. This world is blind. Few can see here. Few go to heaven, like birds escaped from a net. 9. Swans travel the path of the sun. magical powers travel through space. The wise are led out of the world, having conquered all bedevilments. Note, the path of liberation is not like a worldly career that rises and sets like the sun, nor yet like the career of the shaman, who is equally bound, albeit to a different order of interpretation of reality. The path of liberation leads beyond all bondage, ordinary or supernatural. This is an immutable criterion of Buddhist enlightenment. End note. 10. One who violates a principle, tells lies, and rejects the world beyond will refrain from no evil. 11. The avaricious do not go to heaven. The foolish do not extol charity. The wise one, whoever rejoicing in charity, becomes thereby happy in the beyond. 12. Better than sole dominion over the earth, or even going to heaven, better than lordship over all world is the fruit of entering the stream. Note, entering the stream is a technical term for an initial stage of Buddhist realization. It is perhaps most simply defined as putting an end to delusion by views and opinions. End note. End of section. Section 14. The Enlightened. This chapter presents capsules of traditional summaries of basic teachings of Buddha, the liberty of the enlightened, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the peace and freedom of nirvana. 1. By what track can you lead the trackless one, the enlightened one, with infinite perception, the one whose victory is not overturned, whose victory none in the world can approach? 2. By what track can you lead the trackless one, the enlightened one, with infinite perception, whom no ensnaring craving can carry away? Note, a classical Zen proverb says, "An elephant does not walk on a rabbit's path. Greater enlightenment does not retain a teacher." End note. 3. Even the gods wish to be as the wise ones, devoted to meditation, delighting in the calm of detachment, perfectly awakened, imbued with mindfulness. 4. It is hard to get to be human. The life of mortals is hard. Teaching of truth is hardly ever heard. Buddhas hardly ever appear. Note, union of difference and sameness, one of the early Chinese Zen classics, begins and ends with lines reminiscent of this aphorism, which lines some commentators say bear the gist of the whole message. The mind of Buddha is communicated inwardly, east or west. Don't waste time. End note. 5. Not to do any evils, to accomplish good, to purify one's own mind. This is the teaching of the enlightened. Note, the outstanding Japanese Zen master Dogen wrote a whole essay, "Do Not Do Anything Evil," on nothing but the inner and outer meanings of this famous saying. End note. 6. Patient forbearance is the supreme austerity. Nirvana is called by the Buddha supreme. One who harms others is not a renunciant. One who causes harm to others is not an ascetic. Note, Gautama Buddha redefined renunciation and asceticism as abstention from what is harmful rather than escapism and avoidance of the world. End note. 7. Not insulting, not injuring, self-discipline, moderation in consumption, solitude, exertion in mental concentration. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. Note, solitude means being aloof from the influences of society. It may be practiced alone or in company, just as emotional dependency can be practiced alone or in company. One who is physically alone yet still under the influence of other people is not solitary. One who abandons the world in favor of Isolation is not solitary either, because the world is still a companion by virtue of ongoing relation, even though that relation be one of rejection. Pang Yun, a free-thinking scholar of 8th century China, once asked a great Zen master, "Who is the one that does not keep company with myriad things?" The master said, "I'll tell you when you swallow the water of the West River in one gulp." Pang Yun attained awakening at these words. Embracing the totality of being is a direct method of attaining the supreme solitude without losing sight of the plight of the world. End note. There is no satisfaction of desires, even by a shower of money. One is wise to know that the desires are painful, bringing little enjoyment. Note: desires are painful in the sense that a state of permanent sensual gratification is biologically impossible, and therefore it is painful to exaggerate gratification of desires into an end in itself. The Buddha recommends eating with perfect knowledge of the function of desire as an instinctively programmed mechanism for activating the body, not the reason for life itself. One exercise that can be useful to those who may not see things this way is to make a detailed inventory of their own lives and experiences, taking care to try to distinguish subjectively related experience of anticipation, hope, worry, fear, anxiety, disappointment, and so on, from the actual or supposed experience of a specific gratification. Try to assess the relative amount of concern, planning, effort, and so on associated with specific satisfactions. Also, be sure to distinguish the primary experience, the aftertaste, and the memory. After having done this, you may at least discover what you might reasonably think worthwhile or otherwise, and why, if that matters to you in your thought and behavior. This exercise can therefore be just as useful for cultivating constructive understanding as it is for cultivating understanding that is destructive of clinging obsession. End note. 9. Finding no delight even in celestial pleasures, the rightly awakened disciple delights in the destruction of craving. Note: the point of this passage is that Buddhist meditation is not practiced by the purpose of enjoying altered states of consciousness represented by celestial pleasures. End note. 10 through 11. People compelled by fear go to many a refuge: mountains, forests, resorts, trees, and shrines. That is not a safe refuge. That is not the ultimate refuge. One is not freed of all miseries by going to that refuge. Note: after examining religion or spiritual seeking from this point of view, one can understand the Buddha's emphasis on independent liberation through perfect insight with even greater clarity. End note. 12 through 13. But one who takes refuge in the enlightened, the teaching, and the community sees the Four Noble Truths with accurate insight. Misery, the origin of misery, and the overcoming of misery, and the noble eightfold path that leads to cessation of misery. 14. This indeed is a safe refuge. This is the ultimate refuge. Having come to this refuge, one is freed from all misery. Note: the community, literally and spiritually, refers to those who resort to truth through the teaching expounded by the enlightened. The meaning of this is not just confessional, devotional, or institutional, but essentially spiritual. This is illustrated in the Avatamsaka Sutras, book called The Meditation of the Enlightening Being Universally Good. The Dhammapada Nibbana Sutra defines the true community as universal love and objective reality itself. The Four Noble Truths are basic facts to which Buddhists resort. 1. Conditioned states are unsatisfactory. 2. This misery has a cause. 3. This misery has an end. 4. There is a way to the end of this misery. These truths are most colorfully defined and illustrated in the Avatamsaka Sutra in the book called The Four Holy Truths. The way to end misery in this context refers to the Noble Eightfold Path to Nirvana. 1. Accurate perception. 2. Accurate thinking. 3. Accurate speech. 4. Appropriate action. 5. Appropriate way of making a living. 6. Precise effort. 7. Right recollection. 8. Right concentration. End of note. 15. A noble person is hard to find. One is not born everywhere. Wherever such a wise one is born, the family attains felicity. Note: here Buddha reverses Hindu Brahmanism. In Buddhism, birth does not define nobility. Nobility defines birth. End of note. 16. Felicitous is the emergence of the enlightened. Felicitous is the teaching of truth. Felicitous is harmony in the community. Felicitous the austerity of those in harmony. 17 through 18. None can measure the virtue of one who is making offerings to one worthy of offering, whether a Buddha or a disciple, to one who has gone beyond false rationalizations and crossed over sorrow and grief. None can measure the virtue of one making offerings to such as have attained nirvana and are free from all fear. Note: the idea behind this is not to create an artificial class of impudent beggars in expensive finery, but to encourage societies to encourage what is best in human nature and character. End of note. End of section. Section 15. Happiness. This chapter represents an image of transcendental happiness through inner release, a state of tranquility free from hatred, free from restlessness, and free from fear. The sublime happiness described herein is presented as the state of the real human being, wise, insightful, learned, enduring, dutiful, noble. 1. Let us live most happily, free from hatred in the midst of the hateful. Let us remain free from hatred in the midst of people who hate. 2. Let us live most happily, free from disease in the midst of the diseased. Let us remain free from disease in the midst of diseased people. 3. Let us live most happily, free from the restlessness in the midst of the restless. Let us remain free from the restlessness in the midst of the restlessness. Note: these first 3 aphorisms underscore the message that inner peace is not won by trying to reject the world, but by living in its midst without being the slave of greed, hatred, and folly. End note. 4. Let us live most happily, possessing nothing. Let us feed on joy, like the radiant gods. Note: feeding on joy means savoring the taste of abstract contemplation instead of savoring thoughts of ambition and acquisition. End note. 5. Victory breeds hatred. The defeated sleeps in misery. One who has calmed down sleeps in comfort, having given up victory and defeat. Note: the Tao Te Ching says, Extreme fondness means great expense, and abundant possessions mean much loss. If you know when you have enough, you will not be disgraced. If you know when to stop, you will not be endangered. It is possible thereby to live long. End note. 6. There is no fire like compassion, no bad luck like hatred. There is no misery like physical existence, no happiness higher than tranquility. Note, the Tao Te Ching says, the reason that we have so much trouble is that we have bodies. This can also be read, the reason that we have so much trouble is that we have selves. A basic Buddhist exercise is to recollect such statements in times of both health and sickness, in both good and bad moods, to observe the differences in your own feelings and reactions in response to reminders of vulnerability and mortality. End note. 7. Hunger is the worst illness. Conditioned states are the worst miseries. When you know this as it is, nirvana is the highest happiness. Note, contentment is described as a garment that never wears out. End note. 8. Health is the best acquisition. Satisfaction is the best wealth. Trust is the best relation. Nirvana is the best pleasure. 9. Having imbibed the flavor of solitude and the flavor of tranquility, one becomes free from fear and free from evil, drinking the juice of delight in truth. 10. The sight of the noble is good. Association with them is always happy. One who never sees fools will be happy forever. 11. One who walks with fools will sorrow a long way, for the company of fools is miserable, as that of an enemy, always. 12. Wise, insightful, learned, enduring, dutiful, noble. Follow one who is like this, a real human being, truly intelligent, as the moon follows the path of the stars. Note, spiritual seekers would be less confused about teachers and their authenticity if they would look beyond appearances to see real qualities. Under these conditions, and providing one knows one's own biases well enough to keep them at bay, it is not that hard to distinguish reality and falsehood in people. End of note. End of section. Section 16. Pleasure. This chapter focuses on the simple fact that obsessive pursuit of pleasure causes pain. It causes pain to the obsessive pleasure seeker as well as to those who are deprived and abused by the selfish and ambitious behavior resulting from this obsession. A necessary step to inner peace and a happy life, therefore, is understanding the nature and consequences of bondage to compulsive acquisitiveness. 1. Involved in distraction, not engaging in unifying effort. One who gives up what is necessary through obsession with what is pleasing will envy one who devotes himself to unification. 2. Never cleave to what is pleasing or what is displeasing. Not seeing what is pleasant is painful, and so is seeing what is unpleasant. 3. So do not take a liking to anything, for loss of what is liked is bad. There are no fetters for those who have no likes or dislikes. 4. Sorrow arises from what is dear. Fear arises from what is dear. For someone free from liking, there is no sorrow. How could there be fear? 5. Sorrow arises from affection. Fear arises from affection. For someone free from affection, there is no sorrow. How could there be fear? 6. Sorrow arises from enjoyment. Fear arises from enjoyment. For someone free from enjoyment, there is no sorrow. How could there be fear? 7. Sorrow arises from desire. Fear arises from desire. For someone free from desire, there is no sorrow. How could there be grief? 8. Sorrow arises from craving. Fear arises from craving. For someone free from craving, there is no sorrow. How could there be fear? Note, the underlying logic of the statements in 4 to 8 is outlined in the aphorisms 2 and 3 preceding. End note. 9. Perfected in conduct and vision, standing on truth, veracious in speech, minding one's own business, such a one the world holds dear. 10. One who aspires to the ineffable, who is pervaded with consciousness, and whose mind is unattached to desires, is called one who swims against the stream. Note, in this context, to swim against the stream means to be immune to the forces of opinion and outmoded habit that ordinarily prevent people from examining their own nature and fate from any other vantage point. End note. 11 through 12. When a person long absent from home returns safely from afar, relatives, friends, and well-wishers rejoice at his return. In the same way, when one who has done good is gone from this world to the beyond, his good deeds receive him, like relatives receiving a returning loved one. Note, in the vocabulary of Islam, similarly one is said to send onward or forward the results of one's actions to be experienced in the recapitulation at the end of this life. End note and section. Section 17. Anger. This chapter dwells on the advantages of freedom from anger and ill will. Certain aphorisms also provide practical insight on how to overcome these irritations in oneself and even in others by transformation of outlook and habit. 1. Abandon anger, give up pride, overcome all attachment. No miseries befall one who does not cling to name and form. Note, name and form mean ideas and objects in general. Clinging to ideas and objects as real or sacred in themselves, rather than as functional or dysfunctional in their place, is a form of idolatry. End note. 2. One who controls occurring anger as one would a chariot gone off the track, that one I call a charioteer. Other people just hold the reins. 3. Overcome anger by non-anger. Overcome evil by good. Overcome the miser by giving. Overcome the liar by truth. Note, Buddhist nonviolence is not limited to passive resistance, but also includes active transmutation. End note. 4. Speak the truth. Do not become angered, and give when asked, even be it a little. By these 3 conditions, one goes to the presence of the gods. 5. Sages who do no harm, who are always in control of the body, go to an everlasting abode, where they will not sorrow. 6. In those who are ever wakeful, who study day and night, devoted to nirvana, compulsions come to an end. 7. It is an old saying, not a new one. They disparage one who remains silent. They disparage one who talks a lot. And they even disparage one who speaks in moderation. There is no one in the world who is not disparaged. 8. There has never been, never will be, and is not now anyone who is absolutely disparaged or absolutely praised. Note, aphorisms 7 and 8 demonstrate a contemplation to free the individual from what we now call peer pressure. You cannot please everyone, no matter what you do, so watch yourself, watch out for yourself, and seek the truth itself. End note. 9 through 10. Who is capable of praising one like a coin of finest gold, one whom the knowing praise after finding him impeccable, controlled, intelligent, insightful, ethical, and composed day in and day out? Even the gods praise such a one, even the Creator. Note, the name of the last prophet of the Abrahamic tradition who embodied these qualities literally means praised one. A similar description is given in a hymn of the Torah. End note. 11. Guard against physical agitation. Be restrained in physical action. Give up misconduct of the body. Practice good conduct with the body. 12. Guard against irritation in speech. Be restrained in speech. Give up misconduct in speech. Practice good conduct in speaking. 13. Guard against mental irritation. Be restrained in mind. Give up misconduct of mind. Practice good conduct in mind. 14. The wise who control body, speech, and mind are indeed the consummately controlled. Note, body, speech, and mind are called the three mysteries in esoteric tantric Buddhism, wherein the seeker at a certain stage envisions the direct identification or elemental continuity of the three mysteries in oneself and the three mysteries of Buddha as cosmic realities. End of note. Also, end of section. Section 18, Impurity. This chapter describes and defines the sort of impurities that need to be cleared away before inner peace is realized, and introduces certain meditations to assist the process. By awareness of impurity, it is held, the vigilance necessary for liberation can be developed naturally. 1. You are now like a withered leaf. The very heralds of death have come near to you. You stand at the door of departure, but you have no provisions for the journey. 2. Make an island for yourself. Get right to work. Become wise. When you are purged of impurity and free of mental taint, you will reach the noble state of heaven. 3. You have now come to the end of your life. You have arrived in the presence of death. There is no resting place for you on the way, and you have no provisions for the journey. Note, for practical purposes, it is critical to remember that aphorisms like these represent contemplative exercises, not philosophical dogma. End note. 4. Make an island for yourself. Get right to work. Become wise. When you are purged of impurity and free of taint, you will not enter into birth and old age anymore. 5. Let the intelligent one get rid of the impurity of the self gradually, little by little, moment to moment, as a metal worker removes impurity from silver. 6. Just as rust eats away the iron from which it is produced, so do their own deeds lead the overindulgent into a miserable state. 7. Non-recitation is impurity. For an incantation, inactivity is impurity for a house. Indolence is impurity of character. Negligence is impurity in a guardian. 8. Misconduct is impurity in a woman. Stinginess is impurity in a donor. Evil ways are impurities in this world and the beyond. 9. Even more impure than those impurities is ignorance, the supreme impurity. Casting this impurity away, be undefiled. Note, Buddhism considers ignorance to be the root of all evil. Thus, it is the supreme impurity. End note. 10. Life is easy to live for the shameless, for the impudent, for the spoiler, for the braggart, for the reckless, for the impure. 11. But life is hard to live for the modest, always seeking purity, for the independent, for the circumspect, for the seer who lives in purity. The difficulty and ease spoken of here in aphorisms 10 and 11 often concern the agreement or opposition of the surrounding society more than the actual individual energetic cost of the actions involved. End note. 12 and 13. Whoever destroys life, speaks untruth, takes what is not given, resorts to another's wife, or gives himself up to liquor, digs out his own root right here in this world. 14. Know this, O humankind. Evil ways go unchecked. Do not let greed and wrongdoing stir up long-term misery for you. Note, we can only control our own actions, just as we cannot necessarily protect others from the consequences of their own deeds. We cannot fairly expect others to rescue us from the consequences of our own deeds when we have exercised our right or freedom to choose our way. End note. 15 through 16. People give according to belief or faith. So whoever is depressed about the food and drink of another never attains concentration, either by day or by night. But when this is cut off, extirpated by the root, then one attains concentration by day and by night. Note, institutionalized formats that allow competitiveness to breed always end up failing to actualize living Buddhism, regardless of how they may appear to the outward eye, because there is an inherent leak or drain preventing concentration on truth from building up. End note. 17. There is no fire like passion, no captor like hatred, no snare like delusion, no torrent like craving. 18. It is easy to see the fault of others, hard to see one's own. One sifts the faults of others like chaff, but covers up one's own, as a crafty cheater covers up a losing throw. 19. In one who watches out for the faults of others, always ready to blame, compulsions increase. Such a one is far from extinction of compulsion. 20. There is no road in the sky. There is no asceticism in externals. Mankind delights in falsehood. Those who realize suchness are free from falsehood. 21. There is no road in the sky. There is no asceticism in externals. There is no permanence in conditioned things. There is no vacillation in Buddhas. Note, these aphorisms explain why the way of the enlightened is trackless and cannot be reduced to fixed dogma and ritual performance. End note, end of section. Meet me at the next video where we continue with the wisdoms of the Buddha in the Dhammapada. Please do hit like, share, and subscribe.